Mid-2671 Lotak System, Orbit of Lotak 3. Commander Zuna Wolf, TRSC Phantom Queen, 4th Fleet Offensive Expeditionary Unit. Aboard a chaotic yet orderly bridge, Zuna and her command organized their offensive duties against a faltering foe. Yamato commanded a smaller group of frigates that carried a wealthy accompaniment of Marines for ground operation. Jadari, on the other hand, organized strategic efforts of the central battle group that remained behind. With a guiding hand, Zuna did little beyond tactical advice. "Battle Group Morrigan, get in early warning formation," he ordered with a labored and hesitant tone. As he commanded, the few destroyers left to their group proceeded to several tens of kilometers from the epicenter of the battle cruiser, while their escorts roamed in between. This formation was common in modern naval combat, but it was only effective against missiles and torpedoes. So with destroyers and frigates acting as early warning defense, it provided a modicum of safety for larger ships such as carriers. Of course, humanity loved its munitions, with many captains getting within range of their deck cannons for a classic and devastating broadside destruction of enemy ships. In fact, their most recent conflict was the first in which the Navy saw a sudden rise in broadside munitions expended. With her ship loaded with enough guns to liberate a planet by itself, Zuna dismissed her thoughts on the latest development. "Lieutenant Yamato, what kind of reports are we getting from the ground forces?" Without so much as a pause, she replied, "Marine forces are engaging with surviving rebels and the raider platoon as assisting in VIP extractions. Frigates have engaged with similar ships, but have long stood down. It seems the loss of their leader has disrupted their chain of command." "Ha! It serves them right," rang out a voice. Having grown familiar with it, Zuna turned to her podium where the visage of the individual became apparent. "Morrigan," replied Zuna with an overbearing look. "Show some professionalism towards the enemy. It's unbecoming." With a sudden shift in her previous outburst, the artificial intelligence bowed and apologized for her actions. "I'm sorry, Commander, but I can't seem to quell my hatred for the enemy. It would appear my disposition is influenced deep in my lattice code." "Need I speak with Athena to have her look at you for repair?" questioned Zuna, but Morrigan vehemently refused. "Oh, of course not, Commander. There's no reason to call her—" Morrigan, when she had been approved by the Office of Stellar Intelligence and added to the ship, was nothing more than a bloodthirsty virtual companion for the Sellians. However, her efforts to curb her lust for what she believed to be coded revenge has found a plateau and has since grown mild. Her mind has remained pristine, taking well to the command of ship combat systems and higher processing, 2 items Zuna found to be invaluable for combat. "Then it might be best to stay your tongue," said Zuna like a chastising mother. Instead of showing discontent, the AI wholly apologized to her superior, ceding their subordinate superior dynamic. "Now," began Zuna, "anything we need to know from the AEU?" "I've logged a briefing issued to O'Brien and his team from Commander Knight. It should be in your inbox." Zuna looked as she mentioned, finding several unread messages with the item of conversation separated with an exclamation point, dictating its importance. She clicked it and began reading its contents. Morrigan continued to grant an abridged version as she continued to read. "It appears that they captured a Toscan slaver and have since abandoned the original route. They should be entering cryo for the journey and reawaken by the time we reach Atlas." Zuna didn't like cryonic slumber, as it made her feel like she would miss out on life events, knowing fully well that was their job. She was glad the systems thus far could be traversed relatively quickly, unlike the other side of the Republic, which had larger distances between one another. Shud could understand how for some it would be unpleasant, if not miserable, while others didn't let it bother them, or hid it well to not notice. For all she knew, there could be someone, a couple, or even an entire family, still in transit from when they left initially with a ship that is now about to reach its destination. There were still plenty of explorers whose very mission could be another galaxy, and to her, they were effectively non-existent. To her, traveling among the stars meant leaving all those planets aside. Friends, families, colleagues, all of it was effectively abandoned the further one went out. Even when surrounded by cosmic beauty, it was a lonely existence to behold by oneself. As such, relationships between crewmates were relieved with deep space expeditions, and not quite beholden to the standard articles of military justice. Which is why her mind flooded with the thought of seeing him again, and why she wanted to expedite this station as quickly as possible. Since most rules of the ship didn't apply to a station, she yearned for its completion, as well as the prompt end to her mission. The route is 20 systems away, and they want us to assess each one, but I find that impossible, especially in a timely manner, informed Zuna. I doubt we'd be able to clear all those systems before Captain O'Brien reaches it. Isn't there another way we could circumvent our original directive? Curious, her crew turned to her as she spoke, with Lieutenant Commander Grace voicing his rejection of the notion with a sarcastic tone. Whatever will we tell them? He said with a sly grin, with a shared sentiment with Lieutenants Jadari and Yamato. If I may, began Morrigan, I believe we can shift priority to be of similar nature to Raptor teams. Oh? And that is? We issue a critical threat designation for the Atlas system, reported the AI. That's bold, replied Zuna, privy to the notion as she rested her chin upon her wrist. However, Grace had a look of disbelief on his face at the mention as he opposed the idea. You can't be serious. That's a severe breach of protocol, and it would get OSI. On our ass. Zuna, upon hearing this, nodded in affirmation. Commander Grace is right. Designating Atlas under the guise of critical threat would raise too many red flags and needless questions. Besides, we don't have any evidence for there to be a CTD. Anyway, I'm not looking to get my wings clipped so soon, Maury. Dejected, Morrigan recused herself from the discussion, but the topic still seemed to be a point of interest for her two lieutenants. How would that be a breach of protocol? Questioned Yamato, with Jadari sharing his intrigue. Zuna then nodded in the direction of Grace to educate them on the topic as she listened. As you should know, all stellar threats are given a designation that would warrant an appropriate response. That we know. Routine, urgent, immediate, then critical, interjected Jadari. That's right. Severity rises with each one, with routine as your normal pirate subjugation to immediate designation, reserved for a large military force, or invasion, if you will. The Celian campaign fleet was the latter. For one, they were a new race, and two, invaded us unexpectedly. But I wouldn't designate a race such as theirs as anything more than immediate. But critical, I pray we never have to deal with that one. And Morrigan, that wasn't funny, even if it was a joke. The two nodded in understanding to the sudden lesson, but it was vital for them to understand why such a designation couldn't be thrown around. But if we're all on board, there is a better way to go about this, claimed Zuna with a pause. Curious, they leaned closer as they waited with bated breath before delivering a simple solution. We use the Raptor AEU's excuse, Zuna exclaimed. Morrigan, gather the data delivered from Commander Knight and prepare to issue it to headquarters with some modification. Jadari, prepare mission planning with the Celian fleet to take over our duties. I'll prepare a statement that they can't possibly refuse. Yamato, have our forces groundside expedite their mission and see if we can't have anyone take over as temporary overseer for the planet. With a flurry of orders, her team hurried its execution. It was with careful input and foresight that Zuna's objective came to fruition, allowing her ground forces enough time to do their duties, while she and her fleet awaited for further orders.
Mid-2671. Patrol of the arm of Galora Champion Takari, Kerala Legionite Fleet. Upon her waking, she was not met with the blares of caution and warning, but with the low and constant hum of the ship as the sound of air made its way through the ventilation. It was pleasant to her to wake up to silence, as she hated the sharp tones of the alarms fixated on most ships. Luckily, however, most recent iterations have been retrofitted with a lessened pitch so that she and others of her kin don't go deaf. With the doors opening to the bridge, she was again assailed with fervor by the Kiralan, Niji. Lady Tukari! Our champion! Has your rest done you well? Should I fetch you a wakeful drink? By now she had gotten used to his efforts at friendship, stating that he should lower his tone for his sake. Niji, it's too early for your hyperactivity. Learn to yield your disposition, or I will have it done for you, she barked mildly. She came off strong and stern, which caused him to shrink behind his workstation. The bridge had retained its silence. She sat down, facing Karoo, who stood silent by the holographic display behind him. With a silent wave, her turned to the console behind him with a sly and smooth manner, pressing a button that caused the display to change. It was a holographic visual of a ship, separated in two, and held together only by cables and a singular reinforced corridor that ran the center of the ship. It was a rather large ship, with its silhouette roughly in the shape of a large frigate. As she gazed upon it, she came to the realization that it was a familiar ship. It was only by the name of the ship displayed above it did she know who it belonged to. Our scans have found the remains of a heavy frigate, designated as Kutaba, the Heavy Rain, assigned to Jumaru. She closed her eyes as she controlled her breathing before replying, "Any survivors?" He pressed a button that zoomed onto the ship, in the forward portion of the ship. "It appears so. It's faint, but we are detecting life signs aboard the vessel in what appears to be a cargo hold. Life support seems to have also been routed to the room, but it looks like they may not have long. There's too much damage to ship systems to maintain breathable air." Tukari then stood from her seat quickly, her mind already made up as she departed. "Prepare a shuttle with extra life support suits. Tukari, you know as well as I do that this may very well be a trap." She paused, turning her attention to him as he continued to act as her foundation and logic. "I know he's your brother, but you must slow down. To rush in will surely yield unfavorable results which may very well cost the lives of our warriors." Her countenance had loosened, unknown to her how much she had tensed up just moments prior. "I know, Karoo, but I cannot risk losing what information these survivors may possess. If possible, they may know the terror that plagues this space, and we may be able to put a stop to it. I simply ask that you recall your heart. Calm it before you depart," he said, before the doors to the bridge closed, cutting off his words before they could finish. Her head was a mess, as she now had a multitude of concerns upon her that she soon found it taxing to navigate through them effectively all at once. By steadying her breathing as she made her way to the hangar, she felt her heart slow once she isolated her priorities, enough for her to only worry one item at a time. By the time she was ready, she made it to the shuttles that would take them to the now derelict ship that floated aimlessly with occupants near the end of their lives. Before her, the most trusted warriors had gathered, which happened to be all who accompanied her. She swelled with pride, knowing well that she could count on any of them if needed. But she had already decided on who would board with her. "Itari, Kutaru, Melu, you three will be with me in the first shuttle. Nilu, take 3 pups of your choosing for the second shuttle and board when you're ready. As for the rest of you," she said, addressing the now idle hands not selected for the mission, "be on alert and stand by for an enemy attack. It's possible the enemy may be luring us into a trap, so stand ready to meet them." "Dismissed!" she howled, causing the others to follow suit. She then boarded her shuttle with the rest of her team as they were fastening the sealing components of their vacuum-rated suits. It was a simple process, divided into greaves, gauntlets, and a helmet that could hermetically seal to parts of their outfit. If not for their physiology, they wouldn't have the need to keep them separate. But enduring the confines of their seal proved near claustrophobic, at least with earlier suits. But with advancements today, it hardly bothered her, and like her brethren, whenever they were able, would disregard them simply for the feel of solid ground beneath their soles. When they check each other's seals, they all turned inward to the center of the shuttle's compartment, where a hologram of Karoo was presented, along with the holograms of those in the second shuttle, effectively illuminating the once darkened space. When all was quiet, Karoo spoke. "This should be a simple search and rescue for the survivors of the ship before you. Team 2, you will access the rear of the ship to assess the damages and investigate the cause. Team 1 will secure the survivors, so make sure you have enough extra vacuum suits should they need it." They all nodded in affirmation, which urged Karoo to continue. "We don't know if the enemy is still present, so it's in your best interest to be quick. But don't worry. Niji is running in-depth scans for any anomalies, but it won't last long before we have to let systems cool. That is all I have for you. And Tukari, I will continue to monitor your status. Hunt well, warriors." The hologram ceased, reducing the compartment to its regular low-light status when Itari spoke. "Do you really think that Champion Karoo is aboard this vessel? It seems odd. Kutaru nodded to her comment, voicing his own. I agree with Itari. This situation seems different than the others. Before, most, if not all ships were either derelict with no survivors. The same with those destroyed, there would simply be no trace. Then what are you suggesting? Questioned Tukari, to which Itari replied. Before there was a pattern just as Kutaru mentioned, but not this one. It seems more than likely to be a trap. I suggest we exercise the utmost caution when boarding. Understood, said Tukari as the ship slowed. To the side, just beyond the veil of the ship's reinforced glass, was the hull of a ship with an external hatch that had a set of lights illuminating the entrance. That's our entry point. Quickly to the ship, ordered Tukari. The side door of the shuttle hissed open, and luckily the cockpit was sealed, so there was no need to worry about them in the event of a sudden depressurization of the central compartment. One by one, they jumped from the shuttle towards the entrance, with each using a small backpack that allowed for 360-degree motion by sudden bursts of their thruster pack. It was effective, and allowed for sudden acceleration in the vacuum of space. As they neared the door, Melu began his work on the access panel beside it. He made short work of the door, as by the time Tukari arrived, he had already opened the door. Itari and Kutaru were the first to enter, followed by Melu and Tukari. Upon entering, they found that the ship's gravity generator was disabled. Paired with the lack of pressurization, found that there would be little survivors among the corridors. All right, keep it sparse and let's make our way to the survivors. Kutaru, lead on, she ordered. By following the map displayed to Tukari, they made quick work through the corridors, finding all manner of floating debris, and most of all, the countless bodies with the light in their eyes forever extinguished. Looking upon them, Tukari found that they didn't have their vacuum-sealed suit equipped, which told her that the attack happened too quickly for them to respond to. Plus, the added measure of floating liquid from their lethal wounds informed her that the enemy also took the time to ensure they stayed down. She grimaced at the thought, which was shared among her team. Even after they perished, the enemy still took their time to finish off the dead. How barbaric, stated Itari. However, Kutaru felt differently. Do not let your emotions ruin your logic. It's standard protocol to finish an enemy in the field, to ensure there are no surprises that could potentially mean the end of your team. Itari, do you remember your first patrol, boarding the rogue frigate that harassed trade ships near our station? I remember it as a haze. You led the team to secure the crew, and among the fight, found most of them dead, correct? She nodded. Then you quickly found out that the enemy hid among their own in an ambush, killing most of your team. Were it not for Melu and myself, you'd be dead too. The enemy is just being cautious, which makes them very deadly. Kutaru spoke with grizzled experience, as evidenced from his scars and greyed coat that added to his veteran knowledge. Melu nodded in agreement as they continued down the corridors, before turning a corner that led into another hallway that followed the length of the ship. To their right, a set of doors with a pulsing red light above it. From the sign above it, it indicated that the room was the mess hall. Fearing rapid depressurization of the survivors were they to open the doors now, would quickly result in their deaths. So Tukari turned to Melu. From the looks of it, much of the pressurization doors malfunctioned, which allowed most of the ship to vent. Think you can secure this corridor before we open these doors? He nodded. I'll see what I can do to minimize loss of oxygen. They're running on fumes as is, so opening the door might suffocate them. She nodded, turning to the door that had a panel beside it. She pressed a button that rang with static followed by silence. She had attempted to call them, which luckily most doors had the function of in the event of an enemy boarding party or general lockdown. Is there anyone there? This is Champion Tukari, daughter to Neela herself. We are here to rescue you. Are you there? After a few moments, the panel came to life with a tired and groggy-sounding individual. Please, leave us. It's too dangerous. How do you mean? We have secured this corridor, and we have enough oxygen for you and any other survivors. You need only release the safety locks. No, we can't. Please, save yourselves. She was now concerned with their denial of help, which urged her to have Melu progress faster in sealing their section from the vacuum. With his effort, it was done quickly, and he had successfully sealed their portion of the corridor enough to allow a relatively safe opening to the mess hall. However, concerns grew as the individual repeatedly denied their help. "Then help us help you," she began. "What ails your party? If you tell us, we may be able to help." Silence followed, but the panel came to life, as fleeting as it was. "But bomb! If you open the doors or attempt to disarm it, we will all die." She then grew furious as the cowardly act by their foe as she attempted to gain as much information as possible. "What do you know of the attackers? And is Champion Jumaru with you?" More silence followed, but with a laboured breath they answered. "It was sudden. Our engines were disabled. Then when most were sent to fix it, an explosion erupted. Half of the ship was destroyed. It was not enough time to equip our suits. So many were left to die. They came like a wave of death, and when we thought they were going to leave us to die, they arrived. Next thing we knew, we awoke, with bombs on our chest, and with Champion Jumaru gone." "Forgive me, Champion, Tukari." His breathing slowed before ultimately leaving the panel in silence. "Wait! No! We can still get you out. You just need to hold on." But when her calls were met with silence, Karu spoke, confirming her intuition. "Tukari, sensors indicate weakening life signs in the next room. What's going on there?" But she shook her head to the disembodied voice. Melu, can we get this door open?" He nodded and proceeded to breach his way through. "Karu," returned Tukari, "their time is waning. We must open the doors now." After a moment of silence, Karu spoke. "Open the doors, Tukari. If what they said is true, then use the corridor walls for cover. But from what Niji suspects, it won't matter in the end if the bomb does go off." She wallowed in her failure to conduct herself calmly, but ordered their advance. "Those bastards will pay! Melu! Open the doors, Kutaru! Itari! Take cover!" They did as she ordered, frustration filling her voice as the doors opened on her command. But instead of finding an explosion to meet them, there was nothing but the floating body of the warrior she spoke with. However, she would not want to end this mission with a loss. By calming her thoughts, she ordered them to advance into the room while prioritizing the safety of those who showed signs of life, no matter how little it seemed. Together, they provided oxygen canisters to those who still had life in them to continue, followed by the assistance of the putting on their suit for extraction when she received a call from Nilu. "Nilu, what news do you bring from the engine room?" she asked. His reply was concise and in-depth. External thrusters took the hit of a projectile, making its way into the engineer's room, which caused them to lose control. Gravity core seems to have been sabotaged shortly after with an explosive, and I have a visual for something you might want to see. She was curious by what he meant, and awaited the photos he mentioned. When they came through, it was curious to say the least, so she inquired further, "What am I looking at? Is that an airlock?" "It is, as you say, but the evidence lies in the area surrounding the airlock," he replied, indicating to the circular impression around the entrance. "Whatever it was, the enemy seems to have a way of docking with our ships, but it's not a seamless transaction, like what you might see with slavers or pirates, since their ships can dock with ours. From what we're looking at, it was a forced entry docking maneuver. It's messy, so I'm betting Celians." The cogs in her mind began to turn, with Nilu's explanation ruling out Galactic Union-affiliated factions, but found the Celians to be wholly unlikely. "No, I'm aware of the Celian tactics. It should be common knowledge for any warrior of Nila. No, these warriors show more skill than many of the better Celian troops to date. It must be that new race that had taken their world not so long ago." "Even if that were the case," he started, "we're too far from the capital. It would be suicide to operate this far out, Champion." And he was right. That the likelihood of the new race known as Terrans to operate this far out from friendly forces, and seeing how they have yet to receive a notification from any major sensor array, she found it unlikely that it was them, but was suspicious nonetheless of the implications. "We'll continue our mission with the utmost caution. At once, we can surmise their presence. Then we'll call in a sizable Union fleet large enough to erase a star. She could tell that her words carried conviction, and ended his call, stating that they will assist with any wounded, to which she obliged. With their wounded and the unconscious, Tukari and her teams rowed their respective shuttles back to their ship, where she took the time to speak with one of the more lucid members, one who went by the name of Gunari. "Warrior Gunari, what can you tell me of the ones who assaulted your ship? And what of Jumaru?" She coughed as she tried to speak through her suit, which came off as muffled. It was sudden. First, we felt the engines shake, followed by an explosion. Next thing we knew, we were floating, and those who were in a room with a supply of life support were lost to the vacuum. They wore armor like I've never seen, and they were silent, like spirits of death, and before we knew it, we had grown unconscious. I'm sorry, but that's all I remember. Their armor? What did I look like? Did it perhaps look Celian? She asked, to which Gunari shook her head. No, their armor was dark, like that of the hues of midnight blue, but their eyes, a visor of red, full of anger, hate, and death. Forgive me, champion, but that is as much as anyone will tell you. They spoke none, only acted, like dolls in service to a greater master. Then I saw you. It wasn't much, and she feared her lucidity had drifted to hallucination, but the descriptions seemed apt to work for any future engagements with the unknown enemy. "Karoo, did you get that?" "I did. We'll keep an eye out for any forces that remotely resemble her description. I just hope it wasn't gilded in delirium," he commented before turning to his work aboard the bridge. It wasn't long before they docked, and were met with helping hands who took the survivors to the medical bay as soon as the doors of their shuttle opened, relieving much of that duty to her subordinates. She then returned to the bridge in hopes of finding her younger brother, Jumaru, praying that he be safe. "Ah, my dear Tukari, my sincerest regards of your kin. I'm sure we are on the trail of the enemy, and so that they may face retribution for the harm they have caused, surely." Niji was the first to address her as soon as she entered, but she didn't snap back at him for silence, but instead thanked him. "Thank you, Niji. Now, Karoo, has there been a development while I was gone?" "Yes, in fact, we received a call for assistance. Looks to be a Toscan slaver ship currently under attack. If we hurry, we may meet the enemy, or at the very least be able to pick up a fresh trail," he replied. She quickly mulled over the sudden news, quickly accepting it with fervor. "At once! Let us assist them, and perhaps they'll owe us." At his order, the Yunni drones began tapping away at the plethora of screens before them. The ship, as well as the rest of her small fleet, began to transition into sub-light as Karoo charted their course, which led deeper into the unknown territories.